of our now we get into the speaking portion of our meeting, and our first speaker today is Nora Ellen. Nora is working out of the dynamic leadership pathway. This is a level 1, looks like an elective into vocal variety and body language. And the title of her speech is Giving the Best Gift. Now, Nora Ellen is an award-winning author and podcast host of Women Starting Over and Moving Up. She will share about one of the most loving acts one can give anyone that is really important, and especially today when more and more people have anxiety and depression. Please help me welcome our first speaker, Nora Ellen. Nora, come on up.
Countrymen, lend me your ears, said Mark Antony and Julius Caesar. I am really grateful that you are going to lend me your ears. And what's nice is you have two ears today. I'm going to be sharing about something really important to me, and that is about listening. Have you enjoyed listening to anybody lately? Have anyone listened to you? Right now, I believe we have a listening crisis. There are people that are lonely, feeling disconnected. They don't feel heard. They feel isolated more than probably any point in time in history, at least in our country. What is listening? Who decides what listening is? What is hearing? Can those be two different things? Listening is when somebody's talking, and usually just one person. That's what I want to focus on today, is two people. One's talking, one is listening. And there is a difference between listening and hearing. When you're at the doctor's office, there's usually maybe some music in the background. You're not consciously listening, but it's there. Versus hearing. When you're listening to someone, hopefully you're hearing everything that they're saying. And I think that's why we just have two ears and one mouth. As we all know, there are incessant talkers. And sometimes I wonder, well, maybe that's why we have bad breath, as if you're talking too much, maybe you need to close your mouth so it smells better in the room. We have active listening and we have passive listening. Active listening shows with your body language. You are looking at them eye to eye and ear to ear. You're not standing there with folded hands. That usually says, I don't want to hear what you have to say. I'm angry, bored, or whatever. The best way to listen to someone is relaxed. Sometimes we're listening on the phone, which is different. If you are listening on the phone, be sure you are active listening and not just multitasking, because people can't see what you're doing if you're talking on the phone. And I think we've learned recently that we can't multitask as much as we think we can. Then there is what I call discerning listening, where you're listening not just for what they have to say, but going deeper and saying to them back what they just said to you to make sure you understand. I call that discovery listening. That is the best kind of listening. My 3 favorite words in life are, of course, I love you, but there's also tell me more. When's the last time you had somebody tell you or ask you, tell me more, to hear more about what you have to say? When people talk, I really do love to draw them out. And I try not to be the one that's going to interrupt and talk too much. I do have a friend that I want to honor. Her name is Linda Reinbold. I learned a lot about myself in my relationship to Linda. She would listen incessantly. Instead of talking, she was an incessant listener. I found that if somebody listens to me, guess what I do? I'll just keep going and talk. What I would do when I realized I'm doing all the talking is I would go blah, 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 blah. Linda, there I go again. I'm just doing all the talking. She would say to me so kindly, she was so amazing. But Nora, My life is boring compared to yours. I didn't know, is that good or bad? She was a fantastic listener. What does listening do? It makes people feel valued, appreciated, especially when you're listening to something that can be quite uncomfortable. Which brings me to, as somebody's talking to you, don't do what I call hijack the conversation. Here they come to you and they need to talk and they need to get something off their chest. They're passionate about it. What do? We interrupt and then we hijack the conversation. Now we're the ones that are passionate about it. Now we have to talk about it when we weren't even thinking about it when this person contacted us to talk. Let them talk. I learned that with a friend of mine she's kind of like an extrovert. I'm more of an introvert. And she would do that. But I learned a good way when I called her to talk to her. And that's ask to be heard. Because it's important to listen to people, but there's times you need to listen. What do you do when you need to listen? I would suggest start with, I just need to be heard. I need to get something off my chest. I need to share it. Psychology Today has written an article about the benefits of talking, but being heard, which is less stress. It takes burdens off your shoulders. There's a really good book. I love it. It's called Can You Hear Me Now? By Dallas and Nancy Demmett. And what's interesting is they're counselors. They found in their own marriage, they were struggling. They came up with 5 points called of discovering listening, which I want to share with you. Focusing, summarizing, inviting, and asking. And the main thing is that they say is if you're going to hear something that's hard, you want to anchor yourself wherever your identity is. Mine is that God loves me. So if somebody is going to share something after I've asked to be heard and they're giving constructive criticism, I just anchor myself in that. In conclusion, be sure to be a good listener. Use the words, tell me more. Don't hijack the conversation. And ask to be heard when you really need to talk to somebody. Just don't assume they're going to listen. Because oftentimes, we're just kind of interrupters. I'm not sure why we interrupt, but we do. And make sure you're focused. Don't let your mind wander as your friend is listening. Always use those words over and over. Yes, I love you, but also tell me more.
All right. Thank you, Nora.